Frontline briefing, uncovering modern warfare's hidden battles. This is how precision turned a $42 million smuggling operation into a $10,000 lesson in physics, and revealed that in modern interdiction, the deadliest force isn't firepower, it's mathematics you can't outrun. At exactly 1000 hours local time in the Eastern Pacific, a go-fast boat was racing north at 50 knots, 140 miles from the nearest coast. 4 Mercury 300 outboards screaming at maximum throttle. Blue tarps covering 2,800 pounds of cargo worth $42 million at street prices. 5 crew members are splitting the load, each expecting to walk away with $2 million. They'd done this run 18 times before. Same route, same boat, same outcome. Success. Stay until the end for the cost breakdown and tactical analysis. The math is brutal. The crew was confident. Fishing vessels in these waters do maybe 12 knots. They were doing 50. No other vessels visible in any direction. Just blue water and what they believed was freedom. Their critical miscalculation, interpreting empty horizons as operational security. The surveillance had begun hours earlier, 25,000 feet above them, an HC-130J. Super Hercules had been circling since 0600, 4 hours before the smugglers even thought they'd been noticed. An AN/APS-154 advanced surveillance radar was sweeping a 200-mile radius, tracking hundreds of contacts simultaneously. The empty ocean convinced them they'd escaped. 4 hours of surveillance proved otherwise. The radar operator had flagged this target at 0800, speed inconsistent with vessel profile, course deviation from standard shipping lanes, no AIS transponder signal. 3 strikes. The sensor operator switched to the Star Sapphire 380 HDC electro-optical system, a stabilized camera capable of detailed imaging from over 140 miles away. Through that camera, he could count the outboards, see the tarps covering cargo, even track individual crew members moving on deck. At 0945, he noticed something critical. The Go Fast had stopped zigzagging and was running straight north. Either they were getting cocky, or they were burning through fuel faster than planned. The tactical coordinator transmitted through encrypted satellite communications. Kimball, this is Eyes 1. Target maintaining steady course, speed 50 knots. Recommend launch interdiction assets. The data cascaded through Link 16 to the USS Kimball's Combat Information Center, to Joint Interagency Task Force South in Key West, to the DEA liaison monitoring cartel trafficking patterns. The Kimball was 200 miles away, too far to intercept at her maximum speed of 28 knots. But she didn't need to close the distance herself. She had something faster. Something with a very specific solution for runners who won't stop. The Coast Guard's HITRON unit. They'd done this 500 times before. Today would be 501. Sometimes the deadliest trap isn't what you can see, it's the numbers you can't escape. The Go Fast was running hard, burning fuel at a catastrophic rate. 4 Mercury 300 outboards at wide open throttle consume approximately 25 gallons per hour each, 100 gallons per hour. Their fuel capacity, roughly 400 gallons. They'd been running for 2 hours since initial detection. That's 200 gallons already gone. 2 hours of fuel remaining at current speed, but their mothership rendezvous point was 3 hours away at 50 knots. Someone had miscalculated, or the added weight of 2,800 pounds of cargo was burning fuel faster than expected. Either way, physics was becoming their enemy. Meanwhile, the MH-65E Dolphin that lifted off the Kimball's flight deck at 1100 hours had 4 hours of endurance and could refuel if needed. The MH-65E lifting off the Kimball wasn't configured for rescue operations. This was a HITRON platform helicopter interdiction tactical squadron, purpose-built with a singular capability, neutralizing vessels that won't surrender. Twin turbo mecha engines delivered 853 shaft horsepower per side. The critical upgrades weren't speed, they were weapon systems, an M240B machine gun for warnings, a Barrett M107.50 caliber rifle for surgical disablement, and operators trained to destroy propulsion systems from unstable aerial platforms in open water. What looked like a pursuit was actually arithmetic fuel, consumption versus distance remaining, and the numbers had already decided the outcome. 20 minutes into the flight, the co-pilot spotted the wake of a white rooster tail stretching half a mile behind the vessel. 4 outboards at full throttle throw massive amounts of water into the air. From 3 miles out, it looked like someone had drawn a chalk line across the ocean. The smugglers were still running counter-surveillance zigzags, completely unaware they'd been tracked continuously for over 3 hours. The zigzag pattern was textbook cartel doctrine: change heading every 3 to 5 minutes, never maintain a straight line long enough for surface vessels to calculate intercept. Against patrol boats, this worked. Constant course corrections burned their fuel too. But against a helicopter operating in 3 dimensions, zigzagging was just wasting its own gas. The smugglers were running their own numbers. Fuel consumed, 2 hours. Fuel available, 2 hours. Distance to rendezvous, 3 hours at current speed. The equation wouldn't balance. But stopping meant certain conviction of 20-year federal sentences for trafficking. Running meant maybe, possibly, potentially reaching shallow water or friendly territory before fuel ran out. They'd take those odds. They didn't know the helicopter above them had dealt with runners before. Many, many times before. The pilot could afford patience. The smugglers couldn't. At 11:30 hours, the final phase began. Compliance or consequences. The helicopter dropped to 500 feet and approached from the stern, maintaining a 500-meter standoff outside effective small arms range while providing optimal positioning for escalation. The pilot matched the go-fast speed and initiated the compliance phase that Coast Guard procedures demanded. The co-pilot activated the LRAD long-range acoustic device, capable of projecting intelligible commands at 162 decibels. That's louder than a rocket launch at close range. The message broadcast in English and Spanish: "Stop your vessel. Prepare for boarding. This is the United States Coast Guard." The helicopter's rotor downwash created a localized hurricane spray and chaos everywhere. But the smugglers didn't slow down. The calculation was simple for them. 5 crew, $42 million in cargo, 20-year sentences each. Surrender meant certain conviction. Running meant a chance, however slight, of escape. 15 minutes of warnings, visual signals, and siren wails produced exactly 0 compliance. The pilot radioed the Kimball for authorization to proceed with warning shots. The approval came immediately. The gunner prepared the M240B machine gun mounted in the side door, capable of delivering 650 rounds per minute. The first burst sent a message written in tracers and waterspouts. Rounds impacted just meters in front of the go-fast bow. The distinctive hammering sound of the M240B echoed across open water. Most smugglers stop at this point. These didn't. They pushed harder, all 4 Mercury outboards screaming at redline RPMs. The boat juking left, then right, then left again in evasive maneuvers. After 3 bursts of warning fire, it was clear they'd chosen the hard way. The pilot called it in. Subjects are non-compliant. The response was immediate, authorized. The gunner transitioned from the M240B to something far more surgical, a Barrett M107 semi-automatic rifle chambered in .50B MG. This wasn't just switching weapons. This was switching from warning to termination. Of the engines, the Barrett M107, 30-pound precision instrument. Each .50 caliber round exits at 853 meters per second with 11,000 foot-pounds of energy, sufficient to penetrate an inch of hardened steel at 500 meters. Against aluminum engine casings, the result isn't penetration, it's disintegration. Each round is calculated to land on metal, not water. And when it does, propulsion doesn't just slow down, it disappears. The physical variables the hit-run operator was solving simultaneously were extreme. Platform velocity, 50 knots across pitch, roll, and yaw axes. Target velocity, 50 knots on divergent vector. Ocean swells added vertical movement to both platforms. Wind-deflected bullets, engine vibration threw off aim. Most military snipers work from stable platforms against stationary targets. Hytron gunners do neither. This particular gunner had over 200 interdictions of experience, thousands of training rounds muscle memory that could compensate for helicopter motion, target movement, and ocean swells simultaneously. Countdown. 3, 2, 1. First round connects. Starboard outer engine, powerhead strike. The 300 horsepower Mercury transforms from machine to shrapnel in milliseconds. Aluminium fragments scatter across the water. Oil pressure drops to 0. Speed, 50 knots to 38 in the span of a heartbeat. The smugglers were probably hoping 3 engines might be enough. Second round, port outer engine. Entry through the block's center mass. Fuel lines severed, cooling system destroyed. Crankshaft locked. Speed drops to 25 knots. Maneuverability eliminated. Third round demonstrates mastery. The gunner has entered the zone, DAD, where platform motion, target vectors, atmospheric conditions, and trigger control converge into perfect execution. The round entered the starboard inner engine's lower unit and exited through the powerhead, taking most internal components with it. 12 knots now, barely maintaining steerage. One engine is trying to push a boat designed for 4. The fourth and final shot ended all pretense of escape. The last Mercury exploded in a shower of metal and oil. Propulsion, 0. Escape routes, none. Options, exhausted. The smugglers sat in their disabled boat, probably calculating whether federal prison was better than trying to swim 200 miles to shore. The helicopter maintained an overwatch position, while the Kimball launched 2 response assets. 2 7-meter RIB, rigid hull inflatable boats hit the water, each carrying 6 operators from Tactical Law Enforcement Team South. These weren't patrol officers. These were Maritime Special Operations personnel trained for opposed boardings in non-permissive environments. Their 470 horsepower diesels pushed them at 45 knots across the swells toward the target. The 2 RIBs approached in a textbook pincer maneuver. Each boat carried a Tacklet South Squad operators wearing Level 4 body armor with integrated flotation, M4A1 carbines with holographic sights, and enough less lethal options to handle any resistance level. The lead RIB approached at an oblique angle, the coxswain maintaining perfect spacing. As they closed to within 10 meters, the lead operator stood in the bow, sidearm trained on the smugglers. Orders delivered in Spanish, hands visible, movement ceases, assume prone positions. Compliance was immediate. 12 weapons covering 5 criminals who were rapidly reconsidering their life choices. Final count, 5 smugglers detained, 2,800 pounds of contraband seized, 1 go-fast boat disabled and later destroyed. 0 casualties. 0 shots were fired at personnel. Just 4 precisely placed rounds into engine blocks. The go-fast boat, now a stateless vessel under international maritime law, received a Viking funeral. Accelerant spread across the deck. A single flare was tossed aboard, and the $42 million crime scene became the world's most expensive bonfire before slipping beneath the waves. The cost calculation is almost absurd in its asymmetry. The Coast Guard expended approximately $10,000 for this entire operation. 4.50 caliber rounds at roughly $40 each, helicopter fuel for 2 hours of flight time, operational support, and personnel costs. The cartel's losses? $42 million in street value cargo seized, 1 go-fast boat destroyed, estimated value $200,000 with engines and modifications, and 5 experienced crew members now facing 20-year federal sentences. Total return on investment, approximately 4,200 to 1. And this was just one interdiction. Since 1998, Hitron has conducted over 500 vessel interdictions, removing an estimated $6.7 billion worth of contraband from cartel logistics chains. The tactical lessons are profound. First principle, continuous monitoring negates evasion tactics. The HC-130J's 200-mile sensor coverage establishes contact hours before targets achieve situational awareness. Second principle, thermodynamics determines outcomes. Fuel consumption rates, intercept geometry, and platform endurance create mathematical advantages for airborne assets. Third principle, dimensional superiority defeats lateral evasion. Aerial platforms eliminate angular inefficiencies that constrain surface vessels. Fourth, precision forces minimize casualties and preserve evidence. Dead engines turn a high-speed threat into a controlled stationary vessel that can be processed safely. Fifth, training intensity equals operational success. Is hit-run gunners fire over 5,000 rounds in training to master impossible shots. Why target engines specifically instead of sinking the boat or targeting the crew? The answer is operational and legal. Sinking boats destroys evidence and creates search and rescue emergencies. Targeting personnel raises excessive force concerns, but a boat with no engines is simply an immobilized vessel waiting to be processed. Cargo intact, crew intact, evidence preserved. The engines are also the largest, most vulnerable targets on the vessel. Aluminum engine blocks filled with precision parts that turn into shrapnel when hit by anti-materiel rounds, traveling at 853 meters per second. Each well-placed round erases roughly 300 horsepower from the fight. The physics behind that is brutally simple. Hydrophone qualification represents extreme selection pressure. Entry requires elite marksman status, top percentile Coast Guard shooters. That's merely the beginning. Candidates undergo months at the Maritime Security Response Team facility, engaging targets from unstable aerial platforms in sea state 4 conditions, 2-meter swells, 20-knot crosswinds, and continuous 3-axis movement. They learn to read ocean patterns, anticipate wave timing, and synchronize their breathing with helicopter motion. A typical training evolution burns through 5,000 rounds per gunner. They master shooting on 3-axis movement against targets on different vectors while compensating for wind, spray, vibration, and vertical displacement. Conventional military snipers rarely encounter these variables simultaneously. For Hitron, the baseline operational environment, the strategic impact extends far beyond one interdiction. Every cartel trafficking organization must now factor helicopter interdiction into operational planning. Go-fast boats, once the preferred method for moving bulk loads across the open ocean, are no longer viable without countermeasures that don't exist. The physics problem is unsolvable. Faster boats burn more fuel, reducing range. Slower boats are easier to intercept. Operating without AIS transponders triggers automatic suspicion. Zigzag evasion patterns waste fuel and do not protect against aerial pursuit. The $6.7 billion hit Ron has removed from cartel logistics since 1998 represents not just seized cargo, but systematic degradation of trafficking infrastructure. Cartels face an impossible dilemma with each adaptation. Invest in faster boats that burn more fuel, reduce range, and increase detection signatures. Use slower vessels, easier intercepts, and longer exposure times. Adding defensive weapons escalates to lethal force and loses plausible deniability. Scatter loads across multiple smaller vessels to multiply operational costs, increasing coordination complexity. Every response creates new vulnerabilities. Every defensive measure has strategic costs. This is asymmetric interdiction at scale using precision and physics to make large-scale maritime trafficking economically and operationally unsustainable. So here's the final score from this Eastern Pacific interdiction based on publicly available data. Coast Guard, approximately $10,000 in operational costs, 4 rounds expended, 0 casualties, mission success. Cartel, $42 million in cargo seized, $200,000 vessel destroyed, 5 crew members arrested, facing 20-year sentences, logistics chain disrupted. ROI, 4,200 to 1. In modern maritime interdiction, victory doesn't go to the fastest boat. It goes to the side that masters physics, patience, and precision. Modern interdiction's most lethal capability isn't measured in firepower. It's measured in accuracy multiplied by endurance, multiplied by physics. 4 rounds delivered with surgical precision from an unstable aerial platform against maneuvering targets in open water terminated a $42 million operation in under 120 seconds. Not fortune, not superior numbers. Training intensity, technological advantage, and recognition that ultimately mathematics governs outcomes. Was this a perfect execution, or did the cartels make critical tactical errors? Could any smuggling operation defeat this interdiction model? And how should law enforcement adapt as trafficking patterns evolve? Drop your analysis below. If you believe in smart tactics over brute force, hit that like button and subscribe for more breakdowns of modern operational doctrine.